episode 66, where we cover 6 stories from around the world in 6 minutes or less. With that said, start your timer. We begin today in Peru, where the Prime Minister Gustavo Andresen announced that the government will not recognize the results of the country's 2026 presidential runoff if they are determined by the National Jury of Elections accusing the institution of lacking impartiality. This stance has drawn criticism from opposition lawmakers and civil society groups who warn it could undermine democratic processes. The dispute reflects Peru's growing political polarization following years of instability, including the 2022 ouster of President Pedro Castillo. From Reuters, quote, "We are not going to recognize that result because an institution that is not impartial cannot determine the will of the population," Andresen further accused the National Jury of Elections of, quote, "favoring certain political groups at the expense of the country's democracy," end quote. Next, we travel across the Atlantic to Nigeria, where their Securities and Exchange Commission has ordered companies to cease all promotions related to potential initial public offerings for the Degante oil refinery, the country's largest. The SEC emphasized that neither Degante nor its refineries had submitted any applications to list shares, nor had any formal approvals been granted for such an offering. This regulatory action follows market speculation and unofficial social media advertisements about a possible Dangote refinery IPO, with the SEC intervening to protect investors from misleading information. From Reuters, quote, "All capital market operators and relevant stakeholders are hereby directed to desist from associating with or promoting any unapproved public offering related to Dangote Petroleum Refinery," end quote. Next, we travel back across the Atlantic to Mexico, where their economy has achieved its strongest growth in 5 years as of April, with the Economic Activity Index rising to 6.5% year over year. This surge was driven by robust performance in both industrial and service sectors, supported by strong U.S. demand and continued manufacturing investment. The positive data indicates economic resilience despite ongoing global uncertainties. From Reuters, quote, "Mexico's Economic Activity Index, a proxy for gross domestic product, leapt to 6.5 in April compared to the same month a year earlier, the sharpest increase since October 2019, according to non-seasonally adjusted figures published by the National Statistics Agency, the INEGI," end quote. Next, across the Pacific, South Korea is in discussions with major chip makers Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix about new investment plans to strengthen its position in the global semiconductor market. The government aims to provide support and create more favorable environments for these companies to expand their production and research capabilities. This move is a part of a broader strategy to secure supply chains, boost technological competitiveness, and maintain South Korea's leadership in the chip industry. From Reuters, quote, "As global competition to secure chips heats up, the government is discussing with Samsung and SK Hynix support measures and investment plans to ensure Korea's leadership in the semiconductor industry. The government aims to swiftly address challenges faced by companies and is committed to creating a world-class investment environment. Further details, including the scale of the investment, are under discussion and will be announced at an appropriate time," end quote. Next, we travel south to Australia, where intensified bird flu surveillance and testing following a confirmation of the first human case on the mainland, authorities are now monitoring poultry farms and bolstering biosecurity to prevent the spread of the virus after a child recently returned from India tested positive. Although the case has been labeled as low risk for further transmission, officials are taking precautionary steps. From Reuters, quote, "Australia increased surveillance and testing of avian influenza or bird flu after confirming the country's first human case of the disease on the mainland and amid outbreaks on poultry farms. Health authorities said the risk of further spread remains low, but stepped up monitoring to protect the public health," end quote. And finally, we end today in Italy, where prosecutors have requested a life sentence for 4 Egyptian security officers accused of kidnapping, torturing, and murdering Italian student Giallo Regini. From Reuters, quote, "Italian prosecutors demanded on Friday long prison sentences for 4 Egyptian security officials on trial for absentia in absentia for their alleged role in the 2016 killing of an Italian student, a case that has strained diplomatic ties between Rome and Cairo. Prosecutors asked for life prison terms for all the accused, saying there was significant evidence to convict them despite their absence from the court. End quote. And lastly, if you want to read any of today's articles, you can find all of them linked in the description below that like and subscribe button. Also down there, you can find the podcast on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Podvine, as well as the Twitter handle at Your Daily Flip. So with all that said, there's only one more thing to say. Stay safe, don't die.